The movie's playing. Shh. Stop. Okay, fine. I'll talk to you about toxicology because you really want to talk about toxicology, don't you? All right. Well, let's begin this next episode of what I'm calling the fantasy van pool. Take that, magic school bus. All right. I'm just gonna eat my popcorn. Yeah, popcorn. And I'm done. Yeah. So, you want to learn about toxicology? I know you do. It's the hot topic on everyone's mind. I mean, really. Coronavirus, Tiger King, toxicology. So, what exactly is toxicology? So, toxicology is basically understanding any drugs or alcohol within the body. So, you're looking at blood or urine or any other samples that you can find in the body, and you're analyzing it. Why are we analyzing it, you might ask? Well, for things like DUIs, or if you're under the influence, say that you commit a heinous act, you know, doing crazy stuff. We just want to know how much of that metabolite, how much of that THC or that amphetamine or that cocaine is in your body, so that we can understand what's going on and what's happening in your body. So before I begin, how many of you guys have been subjected to like a random drug test at work? I know I have. Why are they having you pee in a cup? Well, the reason for that is simple. Let me share you to my PowerPoint. We're sharing you. So my first slide here. So urine. So why urine specifically? Well, think of your bladder as like the trash can of your body. Anything that you ingest, like that popcorn I just ate, or any water, is going to end up in either your poo poo or your urine. So think of that bladder as like the snapshot of what was going inside your body at that time. The really good thing is that the bladder collects everything and anything that you ingested. So what we do is we treat urine as a qualitative drug screen. Qualitative, meaning we're we're getting the qualities of each and every drug that you've gotten. All right, that could be cocaine, that could be meth, that could be marijuana, that could be anything. All right, that will land up in your bladder, in your urine. So that's why we take urine tests. Now, sometimes we'll take blood tests, but blood tests are more for quantitative. We're quantifying, we're counting the amount of amphetamine molecules in your system, or THC molecules if you're a big, you know what I'm saying. Yeah, it's up to you. It's legal in some states. So that's why we take urine samples, is so we can get a big snapshot of everything going on. So what are we going to do with that? Well, if you're familiar with my class, everything boils down to two things: a screening test and a confirmation test. This video is going to be about screening exams, because I find that sometimes students can find it a little difficult, but I think it's pretty easy once we break it down and actually kind of relate it to something that we know or we're familiar with. So a screening test is a non-specific test where I can simply see, is that substance maybe present? You know, should I go ahead and confirm the presence and quantify the presence? So you're looking at a lot of presumptive tests, meaning tests that say it's possible that it might be there, but we're going to have to confirm to make sure that it is. The usefulness of screening is that if it's a negative, then hey, it's a negative. I can move on to my next case and I don't waste materials on confirmation. If it's a positive, I move on to confirmation to see, is that amount going to impair your motor functions or not? Is it above a certain threshold, below a certain threshold? We'll have to wait and see. So our big screening test in toxicology is this beautiful thing called the immunoassay. So immunoassay, Assay is just a fancy word in the scientific community for test. So, second part of that is test. Immuno, immune system, bodies, antibodies. It just means the immune system. We're using antibodies in this test. So, an immunoassay is simply a test that uses antibodies. All right. Well, what is an antibody? Think of an antibody as like your one true love. It is the one thing that you will pair with for the rest of your life, and only you will pair with that one true love for the rest of your days. Now, some of you might be promiscuous and have many one true loves. All right, I see you. Okay, I see you. All right, don't do that. You're playing with people's emotions. All right, you know who you are. But antibodies bind to antigens, which is their one true love. That is their thing that they are going to hold on forever. Antibodies are specific to their antigen. That means that they will only bind to that substance and that substance alone. All right. So, an antibody for, I don't know, an antibody that's going to bind to Coca-Cola molecules will never, ever, 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 ever bind to Pepsi molecules or Dr. Pepper molecules or even Diet Coke molecules because that antibody is specific for Coke molecules. I'm making a lot of theater references. You'll understand why. So antigens are the things that they're binding to. So in this scenario or in this test, antigens are the drug molecules. It could be amphetamine, it can be cocaine, it can be THC, it can be LSD, it can be, what else is there? Benzodiazepines. It can be any drug, but that antigen will only bind to the antibody that it's specific for. A cocaine antibody will not bind to a methamphetamine molecule or a heroin molecule or any of that. All right, it is a one-to-one pairing. Okay, one true love. Just think of that, one true love. So an immunoassay in toxicology happens over what we call these 96 well plates. So 96 wells, so there's 96 of them, and they're wells. So kind of think of Snow White as she sang into the well. What an old movie, beautiful movie though. So these wells literally are like little cups, little cups. And in the interior of the cup are the antibodies. And so from here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to my whiteboard. And I think this is going to help kind of visualize what's going on here. So I want you to think of that well. So think of that little cup. Remember that little cup shape? And in it, oh, okay, I hear you, computer. So in it, all right. So in it are those little antibodies. So remember, those antibodies are specific to a certain type of drug. And so what will happen, I'm drawing out my 96 well plate here, is this is it from the top view. And so on and so forth. What'll happen is we'll have sample one. Well, now sample one will go across this way, and it'll test for meth and cocaine and heroin and marijuana and all the other types of drugs, but it'll be the same urine sample that goes in this one, in this one, in this one. It'll just be different portions of that urine sample. So I'm going to use a little bit of that urine and put it into my methamphetamine well. And then I'm going to go back to my original urine and take out a little bit more and put it into my cocaine. Then I'm going to go back to my urine and I'm going to put it into my heroin and so on, so far and so forth, so that I can tell, looking left to right, did that person have marijuana, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine in their system? And I'll tell you how we know that, and I'll explain it a bit. So here I have a well that is specific for methamphetamine. That means that those antibodies are specific to binding to methamphetamine. All right, specific to binding methamphetamine. And so from here, no, we don't want to block the camera, my pretty face. All right, my sample That's my little sample. I'm going to put it in there. All right. And let's say that my sample has methamphetamine in it. So what do we think is going to happen? If you said at home that the methamphetamine is going to bind to the antibodies, then you're correct. It's going to bind. It's going to bind. All those antibodies are going to be occupied and they're going to bind. And that's great. How do we see that though? How do we see? I can't really see antibodies with my naked eye, but how do we see that? Well, then what we do is we take out any excess, we'll pipe out any excess, and then we're left, I'm just going to draw 3 for time's sake. Then what we do is we add in a dummy methamphetamine. So from here, this is kind of my dummy methamphetamine. Kind of looks like an M a little bit. And you notice, actually, you know what? I want to make that methamphetamine, eraser. I want to make that methamphetamine red. And you'll see why in a second. So I add that methamphetamine. So I add that dummy methamphetamine that's colored. It's actually colored. It has some chemical marker that's coloring it. And it'll see, is there any spot, any antibody that has room that it can kind of sit in? It'll bind to it because it's engineered like methamphetamine, but it's not true methamphetamine. It's kind of the dummy methamphetamine that we make in the lab. And it's colored so we can physically see it. So what's going to happen when we add the dummy methamphetamine? And if you said nothing, then you'd be right again, because all our antibodies are sitting in their seats, are sitting in their antibody seats. There's no spot for that dummy methamphetamine to sit in. So therefore, our solution, our liquid, let me erase that, excuse me, is colorless. It's clear. Okay? And that's a positive. Now, I think we tend to think of chemical reactions as like color is a positive. We see color and we're like, oh, that's a positive. That means something happened, something happened. That means it's a positive reaction. And I'm here to tell you, no. In this situation, in this assay, in this test, color means negative, okay? Color means negative. And I'm gonna explain why that is. So we're gonna go back. I'm gonna draw my antibodies that are specific for methamphetamine, okay? And I'm gonna have my sample, but it doesn't have anything. It doesn't have anything. They might have just had a lot of Coca-Cola and they were just super hyper, and the cop thought that they were on methamphetamine. So what's gonna happen when that sample that doesn't have anything, when it hits the antibodies? If you said none of it will bind because there's nothing there, then you're right. So we take out the excess. And then what we do, we add in our good buddy dummy meth. It's the fake meth that we engineered in the lab to mimic meth. It will still bind to the antibody that's specific for meth, but it's not actually meth, and it's colored so we can see that color when it binds. So what are we doing? We add it in, and what's going to happen? Now, if you've been paying attention, which I know you better be, because this deserves attention, okay? Thank you. Now, if you've been paying attention, then what's going to happen? Well, our dummy meth is going to bind to our antibodies, and ultimately, all that is going to have some color. So our well is going to have some color. Now, what does that mean? It means it's negative. Our dummy meth took the spots of the antibodies that would have otherwise been filled if methamphetamine was in the sample. So the dummy meth and the meth are kind of competing for those antibody seats, okay? Now, if the true meth did not show up, if it wasn't there, then that leaves all these empty seats for our dummy meth, okay? And they will just sit right in, snuggle right in, and watch the movie. Again, why am I making all these movie references? Well, I like to use this analogy. So imagine a theater, a movie theater, where all the seats that are not filled by customers are sat in by employees of the theater. And let's say that the costume or the uniform for the employees is a bright orange color. Now, the owner of this theater, the movie theater, he also produces movies in his spare time, and he made this movie and he released it. And say that the movie was super popular. It had positive reviews. It had positive reviews. Do we think a lot of people are going to come and see that movie? I mean, this is under non-quarantine rules, all right? This is like PQ, pre-quarantine, all right? Or post-quarantine, whatever. The quarantine is so crazy. So if it has positive reviews, then a bunch of people are going to sit in the seats. They're going to buy seats to this movie theater, and they're going to sit down and they're going to watch the movie. And the movie theater owner and producer is going to look out into the audience, and he's going to see, wow, oh, all these seats are filled. That's awesome. Now, let's change this around a little bit. What if the movie got negative reviews and no one really wanted to go see it, quarantine or not? Like, ew, no, I don't want to go see that movie. Well, they're not going to sell seats. They're not going to sell any tickets to the movie. And what's going to happen is the people in the movie theater who work there are going to sit and they're going to watch the movie. Now, the same movie producer, theater owner is going to peek around, going to look at the seats, and he's going to see a bunch of color. And he's going to know that not a lot of people have purchased seats to his movie. And that's negative. That's not good. That means it was a stinker. Ew, stinker. That means that his movie had negative reviews and it was ultimately not a good thing. Okay? So when we don't see color, that's positive. That means it's a positive chemical reaction. When we see color, that means it's a negative color reaction. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to just show you finally. So when we see color, when we see this color here, that means that there was little drug present. So you see A, that A maybe is for amphetamine, and then that E is that color tag. That means that there were no antibodies that bound to any drug. No drug present, no amphetamine was present in the urine sample. But say that we have here, there is no color or like a light lavender, that means that there was amphetamine or drug in the sample. And it settled in, it nestled into the little antibody seats, and it enjoyed the movie. All right? So just think of that. All right? An immunoassay where ultimately you have antibodies, where there's competition between true drug and dummy drug, and they're battling it out. But a positive result is where there is no color, and a negative result is where there is color. Okay, guys? So with that, I think we're good. That's your next installment of the fantasy van pool. I like that, fantasy van pool. So until next time, guys, this is Mark. I'm signing off. Yeah.